Hi, I'm Brooks. I'm an alcoholic. I've had a daily reprieve from the use of drugs and alcohol since December the 17th, 1985, and that's only by the grace of God. It's a neat conference. Is anybody here for their first conference? Wow. Did anybody here write a hot check to come to this conference? That's okay. You can put your hand down. Because that's what I did at my first conference. And there was a guy in Midland at the 710 Club named Joe C., who was our grapevine chairman, also was treasurer that year, that called me a couple days after the conference and said, hey, what you want to do about this check? And I said, what check? I don't have a checking account. He said, exactly my point. So I had to write a hot check to come to my first conference. And it wasn't no big deal. Joe brought me in there and he gave me my first $5 to go towards the check. And he made me pay him back $1 a meeting. So I brought 2 with me instead of 1 in the beginning, coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I always want to tell a story. And I've got to tell this story in the last year or 2 because I have to do something kind of. They didn't get me from Toastmasters. I don't have any training in doing this. I didn't have but 3 words when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you can't use any of them in public. So I have to do something to kind of take my mind off of the nervousness. But I was invited to speak in New Mexico, and I'm a really crummy golfer. But they assured me that if I would play golf in their golf tournament, they'd put me on the team that wins every year, and I like to win. So they put me in a scramble with 2 other guys that always win the tournament, and I'm out there, and I went and hit a bucket of balls before I went down there because I don't know about other alcoholics, but I like to look good. So I didn't want to embarrass myself too bad, and they weren't expecting me to be very good, but so I went out and hit a few balls, and we went down there, and God, I was really going to focus and concentrate, and I had my mind on set on hitting at least 1 good ball. Maybe they'd use just 1 of my balls, but God, it was horrible. I mean, I was hitting the ball like 2 foot off the tee, straight up in the air, straight sideways, this way, and Ted, my friend that I was playing with, kept saying, hey, Brooks, I think you need to turn this way. Well, the damn pin's over here, and Ted wants me to hit the ball this direction. Well, I ain't no way. It won't work. I'm not going to do it, period. But, I just kept getting more and more frustrated. And every hole I'd try a little harder, and I'd focus a little better, and I'd concentrate, and I'd keep my head down. I'd do all that crap. And the ball would go straight up there. Finally, I drove my 2-iron, the head off my 2-iron about 100 yards, and I was still holding my damn stick, So finally, Ted says, I really think you ought to, and so I said, fine, out of frustration, aggravation, and the reason I love this story because it reminds me of me in Alcoholics Anonymous. I just would not be teachable. No matter what Ted said, it wouldn't work, I wasn't going to do it, no way. But finally, out of frustration and embarrassment, quite frankly, I said, fine, whatever. I was about half mad. He said, hit the ball over here, so I just turned that way, 45-degree angle. Closed my eyes, put my head down, kicked around, and hit the ball hard as I could. Just mad. And all of a sudden, I hear everybody on my team say, God, look at that. Wow, look up. Here comes the ball. Well, thing's 2 foot from the pin on the closest to the pin deal, and I won a trophy. So my first golf tournament ever, and I'm winning a trophy. Boy, I'm really feeling good now. But you would think that I would go back and start hitting all the balls. Not me. I'm a stubborn case of alcoholism, Harold used to say. I will go right back to my same way of hitting the ball. I get up there and tee off just like I'd been doing. I'm getting the same results one more time. This way, that way. And Ted would gently put his hand on my shoulder and say, I think you need to turn this way. And finally, out of frustration and desperation, I'd finally turn over here knowing it ain't no way it'll ever work. You can't play golf in that direction and want to go there. And every time, without exception, I did that, I had a good shot. The only good shots I had all day. And that reminds me of Alcoholics Anonymous. They came here and they said, this is what you do. This is what we did. If you'll do this, certain results will happen as a result of that. But not me. You know, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm different. You don't understand. You never shot dope like I did. You know, you never went to the places I went. You know, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous my first time in 1978. I hadn't had a haircut or shaved in 7 years. I was wearing a Willie Nelson t-shirt with the sleeves cut out and a pair of patchwork pants with no jean left and a pair of thongs. One of them blew out. And, you know, I didn't have no car. You know, I couldn't even, I was worse than being unemployed. I was unemployable. I couldn't have held a job if you'd have gave me one, because you can't just run off every 5 minutes and take a shot of dope when you're working. And I had a Charlie Manson smile. You know? So people were not just driven, pulled to me, you know, momently. But I met one person, Alcoholics Anonymous, the first meeting I ever went to. How did I get to Alcoholics Anonymous? I drank too damn much. You know, and for me it was the lethal combinations in drugs and alcohol on a daily basis for entertainment. That's the way I like to do. That was my deal. You know, I had a drug of choice, alcohol. But with me, it was just bigger ones and closer together. Bring it on. It didn't really matter. You know, I feel real fortunate to be alive and be in Alcoholics Anonymous, and sobriety is just a miracle for me. It's just awesome. It's powerful. You know, because I wasn't even supposed to get out of Fort Worth, Texas. You know, I don't talk a lot about that, about my drinking years, about my childhood years, because I'm not sure it really is relevant in Alcoholics Anonymous. What excites me is what's happened since '78 when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and took a chair. But prior to that, to qualify myself just a little bit, you know, I was brought up in Fort Worth, and all of my uncles and my father and all of my family were all gangsters. And we didn't talk about football on Sundays. I grew up with grown men talking about how they were going to commit criminal acts, burglaries. They were all shooting drugs. They were all really mean. I remember my dad buying me a pair of boxing gloves one time, and God, I was really excited until I found out his intent. And every time we'd go to his friend's house, he'd make me put them damn gloves on and match me against all the other guys' kids. And I was the little short fat one, you know. And so we'd go over and he'd say, my kid can whip your kid's butt. And they'd bring out one like this and he'd whip me. And then Dad would whip me, because you didn't get whipped and you certainly didn't cry in my house. And when I was 8, he got killed, and I was glad. And then my mother decided that lifestyle was not quite what she wanted, and so she married a guy that didn't drink. And I was really confused then. You know, she married a carpenter that took on myself and my 2 sisters, and then they had 2 more, and he was a hard-working man that didn't drink. And I was confused. You know, I was confused, and so they began at an early age trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do with Brooks. You know, my mother and my stepfather and I was just giving them fits, because, I mean, my lifestyle was not used to that. And so Mother started trying to figure out what to do with me. So I was out of step with the world around me. I hadn't even taken a drink, and I was already out of step. They didn't have to tell me that. I knew that internally. I knew there was something y'all knew about living that you weren't sharing with me. You know, and finally my mother began taking me to a little Baptist church, you know, because they took me everywhere. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with him? I didn't know. And what's wrong with you, Brooks? Why do you do those things? I don't know. You know, why aren't you a better student? Why are you always fighting? Well, hell, they trained me to fight. You know, why are you stealing? Because everybody I knew steal. You know, we stole. That's what we did. We talked about stealing. We didn't know about baseball. But I was just a mess. And so they carried me to this little Baptist church there in Midland. And I'm here to tell you, I love church. I love that little Baptist church. My parents wouldn't go, but they would take me in order to try to find something to do with me, try to do something to fix me. And God, I love church. And every Sunday in our church, this guy would say, who'll come? Who'll come? You know? And every week I got up and went. You know? Because I knew I could feel something there. I knew that I didn't have what I needed to live. I knew that I didn't have understanding of the world around me, and I felt the power in that little Baptist church. I felt maybe I had a chance. Maybe I could be complete. And finally, I was getting up to go one Sunday, and the preacher looked at me and said, "Brooks, sit down. You've come enough." You know? Brother Day, you've come enough. Well, me with my alcoholic mind, I didn't hear God loves you, and you've been here enough, and you've surrendered, and you've been baptized 6 times, you're fine. You know? With my alcoholic mind, what I heard was, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. God can't love you. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not tall enough. You're not sharp enough. You're not cool enough. You're not brave enough. You're not good enough. That's what I heard. And so I never would go back to that little church. And from that point on, I never could find anything else. I never found anything else until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous that made me feel like I was going to be all right. Like there was any chance of me ever being all right. Drugs and alcohol didn't make me feel like I was going to be all right. They just obliviated me. I suppose that's the reason I use lethal combinations, because I didn't want to feel nothing. I used to come to Alcoholics Anonymous and Jim S. and Val C. and all those old timers that get up and talk about hallucinating. And I didn't identify with that, because if I didn't hallucinate, I went back for a refund. You know? The stuff I bought, if it didn't make you see stuff, it wasn't any good. The first time I ever drank, Midland, Texas, I went to jail. You know, we did normal high school stuff. We bought a 6-pack and went to the drive-in. You know, everybody else was all right with that. But me, I got drunk, started throwing beer cans out of the car at passing cars. And so they arrested me. First night I ever sat out to get drunk, I was arrested. Spent the night in Odessa County Jail. The other guys never would go drink with me anymore. But I couldn't wait for the next weekend. They both became real prominent people in the country. Not me. You know, I couldn't wait to, you know, I wasn't going to get caught the next time. Or the next time. Or the next time. You know, I was always going to be a little smarter, a little sharper, and this time I was going to get away with it. And really, the price was worth paying for me because it did something for me. It obliviated me. For those short periods of time, I didn't feel anything. And if had it continued working, I probably would have never came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Shortly after, my sister thought I was a little too redneck, so she slipped me some LSD. And, you know, a normal person, somebody slipped something to them like that, they go back with a vengeance. They want to know why you've done that. Me, I just wanted to know what it was and where I could get some more. You know? And for the next 12 years, I took everything I could get my hands on. It didn't really matter. You know? And that took me to places I never expected to be. And by the time I was 25 years old, I was starting to reach a place in my life where I couldn't function. You know, where I couldn't do anything. And that's the days just prior to 1978 when I was finally becoming to a point of surrender. Where I understood that drugs and alcohol were not going to continue working for me. They weren't going to make it possible for me to survive. And, you know, I used to walk by the Austin State Hospital because I had moved to Austin to get around people that looked more like me, because they didn't in Midland. And here I was 25 years old. I'd walk by the Austin State Hospital barefooted, and I'd look through that 12-foot chain link fence they had around the Austin State Hospital, and right beyond that fence were great big pecan trees. And I'd look in there and I'd see that park-like atmosphere, and I'd think, right there's euphoria. You know, right there in that mental institution, they had everything that I wanted. They had food, clothing, shelter, plenty of drugs, and crazy women. Yeah? Yeah? And you didn't have to have no job, you know? You didn't need no car. You didn't have to worry about how you was going to function. Because they was going to do it all for me, and they was going to give me plenty of authority, and I was going to be all right, and it seemed like a good idea to me, and it seemed a hell of a lot better than getting a job and getting sober. And so I walked down to the old Sitting Bull, which was the original topless bar in Austin, Texas, to have a couple beers and figure out what I was going to tell these people so they let me in. Because, you know, I was convinced that's where I wanted to be. And there, in that topless bar, I met my first wife. God, she was gorgeous. You know, and I just needed some kind of distraction. You know, my mother told me for years, her answer to my problem was, get you a good wife and you'll straighten out. Have some children and you'll become responsible. Do these things and you'll be okay. But I wasn't buying that. But when I saw Ann, I thought, hey, this will work. So instead of going to the mental institution, I went another route. You know, I ended up in Louisiana. You know, living in Louisiana with a wife named Moonbeam and a child named, you know, this is no lie. I've got a kid today whose name is Sunshine. We had a dog named Reefer. You know, had a '63 model microbus with wooden bumpers and big yellow flyers. God, I was living in style. My mother-in-law from that marriage used to say, Brooks, what the hell are you going to do with this family? You got a family. You need to grow up. What do you want to do? And I said, I'm going to sit on the front porch and smoke pipe. What do you want to be when you grow up? I said, that's it. You know? I'm here. You know? Got a wife with a job and a bag full of dope. You know? Everything's going to be okay, but, you know, normal people don't want to live that way. And Moonbeam had a baby, and the next year she went back to Ann and threw my ass out. You know, he turned 1 year old, and on his birthday she came to me and she said, you're out. I'm not going to live this way with you anymore. This is unacceptable. I'm not going to expose my child to your, you know. See, I was worse. I never lived on Skid Row. I did worse. I infected good people with Skid Row. You know, I exposed my mother and dad to Skid Row. My wives to Skid Row. My employers to Skid Row. You know, I took them places through watching me and through having to deal with me that they never wanted to go. They didn't understand. I didn't understand. How could they? How could they understand? I had no explanation for the way I was. You know, and that little boy and that wife meant more to me than anything had ever meant to me, because I really thought she was going to fix me. I thought when we got married it was going to be okay. I'd found a way out. She just didn't have the power. Her and Jeremy just didn't have the power to make it different for me. And I didn't know till I came to Alcoholics Anonymous that I had no longer had the power. I had lost the power of choice over alcohol. I wasn't going to decide not to drink. I had no choice. I wasn't going to be better than I was. I was the best I knew how to be. And I'm here to tell you that I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1978 the very best I was able to be. The very best Brooks that was possible for me. With all the power and all the will that I knew to muster. And it was not much. You know, after Ann had left me and the house had went down the Hoosiatu River and the flood at 76, you know, I don't know how I survived the flood of 76, because I was in Louisiana. I'm a Texas boy, and it don't rain much there, and we were living on the river, and I had a partner named Coon Thibodeau. And Coon called me, and the water was already up to my porch, and Ann had left and took everything but a mattress that I was sleeping on in the bedroom. And Coon called me, and he said, hey, we're having a flood party at the house. Let me come over. I'll come over and get you in the boat and bring you over. And so, sound like a good idea to me? He came pick me up in the boat, and I went to his house and took a bunch of tequila and soapers. And I don't remember going home, but I remember waking up the next day, and sometime during the night, Coon had taken me back and put me back on that mattress. And when I woke up, I had floated from the bedroom to the kitchen. And the water was rushing through the house, and you looked out, and there was just a river all the way around you, because the Amet River was fixing to go to the Pontchartrain. And I was just bobbing out there, you know. And but the phone was still working. It was up high enough it was dry. And so I got on the phone. I called Coon. I said, God, this house is just bobbing. He said, where are you? I said, I'm in my house. He said, oh, you're not supposed to be there. He said, that whole river is flooding and everything's going down river. And I said, well, what am I going to do? And he said, well, I tied a bolt to your back door. And sure enough, he had, and it had floated in. So I went and, went and got in that boat, you know, and survived one more time, you know, by the grace of God. You know, I think God had a plan for me. I think God had a plan for me. I think there's a reason I didn't grow up like my dad. I think there's a reason that I didn't drown, you know, in 76. I think there's a reason that one of those times that I lay down and said, oh, damn, you killed yourself now. Because, see, I used to go to bed lots of nights knowing I'd killed myself, knowing I'd overdosed myself, knowing that I wouldn't wake up the next day and wake up and be surprised. And I never set out to kill myself. I'm not saying that. I just did all I could do every time I got a chance to, and a lot of those times I just knew I'd done too much. But for the grace of God. You know, and shortly after the flood, I went back to Austin. I went back to work for a sound company that I had worked for periodically for 10 years, working in the music industry. And he sent me out on the road, Jerry P., and I just saw him again this month at a concert. He called me. He was in Midland. And Jerry called. He said, I got one more show for you, one more gig for you. If you think you can pull it together, I'll send you out on the road with Steppenwolf and his road manager, and we'll do the East Coast tour, which is something we commonly done in those days, and we'd go all up and down Cape Cod and that part of the country. And he sent me out, but I don't ever remember what happened much after that. But I came to in Gloucester City, New Jersey, of all places, and I couldn't remember my name. I didn't know where I was or where I was going or what I was supposed to be doing. And there, again, by the grace of God, I opened my billfold, and inside that billfold there was a piece of paper that said Mom. And I called that number on there and said, and she says, that's you, Brooks? And, part of it came back. I said, oh, yeah, it's me. I'm in Gloucester City, New Jersey, and I don't know what's happened, but I can't remember anything. And so she sent me a bus ticket, and that's what brought me back to Midland, Texas, which began the thing that's so damned exciting. It's the thing that brought me to the point because I was finally getting enough. I was finally getting to a place where I knew I couldn't live that way and not another minute. See, recovery started for me the day that I told my innermost self, I can't stand to live this way anymore. I don't know how I'm going to change. I'm probably not. I don't want to quit drinking. I don't want to quit using. I don't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous by this point. I just knew I couldn't stand to live the way I was anymore. And Mother brought me back to Midland, and I was living in a little old house on the corner of Colorado and Baird. And I still had some dope left, and I had a sister that'd bring me dope. And Sharon came over one day and said, I'm not going to be coming back to see you anymore. She said, because I can't stand to watch you die this way. So I'll not be here. And when Sharon walked out, she was the last person I had. She was the last, Al-Anon's call her the neighbor, but she was the last person I had. And, here I was, tough guy, scared to death because the last person I knew had walked out on me. And it was my sister. And I knew she meant it. And I just became terrified. But I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I got the phone book down and began turning the pages because what I had decided the only way out for me was to kill myself. And I was going to stick my 45 in my mouth. And before I did that, I was going to call Nooney Ellis, which was our local funeral parlor in Midland. It's still there today. Just buried Harold last week at Nooney did. And so I was turning through the phone book, looking for Nooney Ellis still, and it turned to, I swear to God, turned to the Midland Council on Alcoholism. And that was the first time in my life it ever occurred to me that drinking or drugs had anything to do with the way I felt or the way I acted. And I, to this day, am not sure why I called the Midland Council on Alcoholism, but that's what I did. And I called the Midland Council on Alcoholism, and she said, hey, I understand how you feel. There's a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous a couple blocks from where you're at. Why don't you go? And that's where I went. 1978, the summer of 1978, I walked from corner of Colorado and Barrett to the 710 West Ohio route and made my first meeting. And now's when I get excited. Now's when I get excited because I'm here to tell you, in that meeting I met St. Jerome. He was the only person I identified with. And people that have been to the 17, no, it's kind of a ritzy joint. You know, I mean, people get clean and they dress up and they got nice jewelry, and it wasn't me. And I've already told you how I look. And they didn't just beat the door or beat a path down to get to me, you know. And I was way too young. I know I don't look that anymore because it's been a long time. But I was 28 years old, and that was young in Alcoholics Anonymous then. In that group, they were used to people being a lot older than me, and they didn't really feel that you could be ready at 28 years old. And they were just beginning to see the toll that drugs now and the combination were bringing on people, and how they was bringing them a little earlier. And so I wasn't exactly in the right place anyway, in some people's mind, but in St. Jerome's I was. And St. Jerome was a guy that took all the people in Alcoholics Anonymous, our group, and took them under his wing, the ones that nobody wanted, the ones that were never going to be sober, the ones that are never going to straighten out, the ones that didn't have a prayer. We were the andas. We were the drug addicts. We were the young people. We were the ones that wouldn't do the work. And, you know, and there was some merit to what they said, but Jerome didn't care. You know, and I thought they called St. Jerome because he was really wonderful. And after I'd been hanging out with him a while, one day one of the old timers told me how he got the name. And what basically happened is St. Jerome had been sober 18 months. One day he was talking to one of the old timers. The old timer, Jim S., told him, he said, "You're the sickest person I've ever met with 2 years of sobriety." Jerome said, "Compared to the way I was when I got here, I'm a saint." Somebody picked up on it and they started calling him St. Jerome, and that's what they called him when I got there. St. Jerome, the one that worked with all the losers, all the young people, all the drug addicts. I don't identify myself as a drug addict and alcoholic anymore. I don't identify myself as anything but alcoholic. And I'll tell you why, and it's really not about you or about Alcoholics Anonymous. It's about what it did for me, what it did to me. For the first 2 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was an alcoholic and a drug addict. It offended a lot of people. I didn't care. My hair offended a lot of people. I didn't care. The way I talk offended a lot of people. I didn't care. But 2 years after being in Alcoholics Anonymous and being the one that was always drunk, the one that was always having to change his dry day, I had to take a real look at myself. And what I had discovered was, you can't be different in Alcoholics Anonymous. Jerome had written something in my book at my first meeting. He said, "Brooks, please don't suffer from terminal uniqueness. I need to find ways that I can identify with people in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I can be like people in Alcoholics Anonymous, not in ways that I have to be different. And this is just for me." And every time I said I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, I was setting myself up to need something different, something outside Alcoholics Anonymous. I couldn't recover with the same steps the first 100 used because they were vanilla alcoholics, or so the old timers would say. You know, but what it did for me is every day I said that, I was reaffirming I was a little different. I needed the steps to be a little different. I needed to work them a little different. I needed to go to little different meetings. And all of that kept me sick. So what I finally determined in my own mind for my own recovery is that what's wrong with me is I suffer from a disease. It's called alcoholism. And if it's called alcoholism, I have a solution. I have a set of steps. I have a big book. I have meetings. I have a support group. I have old timers. I have work to be done. Because the disease I has a place of recovery. Now, for me not to say that I use drugs would be asinine. Because how can I tell my story without that? Because I tell my story hoping that one day, one more Brooks will come to Alcoholics Anonymous and say, "I identify with that man." And he'll begin to believe that if it's possible for me, it's possible for him. So I tell my story the way I remember it. Reminding myself always that the people in Alcoholics Anonymous don't need me. I need them. And doing the best I can when you only have one brain cell left. You know? You ought to try to keep up with me with one brain cell pedaling fast as it can. It's hard to cope. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was just like I said, you know, I was unteachable. I was unwilling to change. I kept getting drunk, and finally I was sitting in my favorite bar, the Four Seasons, one day, and my bartender said, "Where have you been, Brooks?" And I said, "I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous," and something occurred to me that day. I had a moment of clarity. I was not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you something that happened for me, what that moment of clarity, what it meant to me. The truth is, I was not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous because members of Alcoholics Anonymous do certain things. Members of Alcoholics Anonymous have a book they read. They have meetings they attend. They have steps to work. They have people to help. They have functions to go to. I was not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous because I had never done any of that. All I had done is hang out in Alcoholics Anonymous and take up space. I had never done any of the work, and so I was not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I had picked my only sponsor because I liked his wife. It won't work. Try it if you want. It won't work. Didn't work for me. You know? But what happened when I had that moment of clarity, see, for me, I think the key is telling myself the truth. Once I saw the truth about myself, and the truth is I am alcoholic and I am going to die drunk if I don't find a power greater than myself. If I don't accept the truth about me, I am the very best person I know how to be, and that requires that I drink. I just don't have the power to be any better or be any different without God. And once I told myself the truth, and when I did is I went back to the 710 group and I said, I know AA is not going to work for me now. I've been here 2 years and I don't ever get sober. I just, I get 87 days and I get drunk. It's not going to work for me. But I don't want to sit here in this damn bar for the rest of my life and say, you don't know if it works or not because you never did anything. I had never done anything. So what I told myself was I'm going to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and for 90 days I'm going to do everything those people tell me to do. I had spent longer than that in jail. It wasn't no big deal. For 90 days I was going to do everything they told me to do. I was going to prove it wouldn't work, and then I was going to go and drink myself to death. And that's what happened. I went back to 710 group, and I went and talked to one of the old timers that had been telling me I wasn't ever going to get sober from the first day. And I looked at Jim and said, I want to give this thing one more try, and I am willing to do anything you tell me. Anything you tell me, I'm willing to do for the next 90 days. And he said, okay, go get a haircut and shave. And of course, immediately I started bugging, but what does that have to do? He said, it really, I'm here to tell you, it has nothing to do with being sober. What it has to do with is Jim didn't want to waste his time on me because there's a lot of people coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and they're worthy of it. And he didn't have but just so much time. And he wanted to see whether I was even that willing. Was I really willing to go to any lengths? Would I do anything? And I did. Thank God. I was willing because I had told myself. I had not told my mama. I had not told my employer. I had not told one of my ex-wives I was going to get sober. I had told myself for 90 days I'll do everything they say because I know it won't work, and then I can drink. I can go and say, AA is a great place, but it doesn't work for me. I tried it. I did all of it. It won't. You can't fool Mother Nature. I came back. Jim said, get a haircut and shave, and I did. He said, come to my house after you get that done. You're changing clothes. And so the next time you saw me the day after that, I was wearing polyester pants and checkered shirts. And he made me move from the back row to the front row. And he made me take a big book and began to read it. And for what that means is it's hard to explain what that means for a person that's used as many drugs as I have. I could literally hear my brain frying. I'm sure it was a hallucination, but in my head, all I heard was a sizzling. You know, when they came out with that deal about the egg frying, I identified with that egg. I could relate. So for what it says, when you tell me to read the big book, what you're saying is me is I'm going to have to go over that book line by line. Again and again and again and again. Harold W. used to say it's the basic text for Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a big difference between text and a book. A book's something you read for entertainment. A text is something you study. And when you can't read and you can't focus, that meant going over and over and over, learning to read. I had to learn to read. And that's what I learned to read was the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had to go to meetings. And Jim got to talking about, how do I claim my spot in Alcoholics Anonymous, young or old? How do I claim my spot? How do I know that this is my place, Alcoholics Anonymous? It's not your place. I'm here to tell you, this is my place. I don't care if I'm in California or Wasilla, Alaska, which I was last year. Alcoholics Anonymous belongs to me, and you know why? Because I took the steps off the wall and I applied them in my life. And now it makes no difference where I go. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. But in the beginning, Alcoholics Anonymous was theirs. And until you experiment with this stuff, it's going to continue to be theirs. What we do is we experiment with God, we experiment with the steps, we apply them in our own lives, and then it becomes personal. And it moves from here to here. And then you know. You know that you don't know. You know you're not special. You know you're an act of grace. You don't know that there's a power greater in yourself, just like the 12th step says. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. That's the ladder. One tread at a time. What's the payoff? Having had a spiritual awakening. What does that mean? I don't know. Each person's may be different. What does it mean to me? I don't have to do it anymore. God's there. I'm powerless, but I'm tapped into a power that'll rocket me into a fourth dimension, the book calls it. It's kind of like a natural high. I began to work the steps. I began to read the book. I began to go with 12-step work. He told me about claiming your 2 square foot in Alcoholics Anonymous. How do you do that? Make coffee. Sweep the floor. Straighten the chairs out. Pick the trash up. Because when you do that, it becomes your place. It's like your house. It's yours then. Can't nobody run you out of your house. Can't nobody tell you you're too young in Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't belong. Because we don't have but one requirement. And if you want to say, I don't want to drink, you got a right to be there. Unless you let somebody run you out. But until you began to claim your own 2 square foot, if you're like me, they can run you out pretty easy. You know, because I didn't feel worthy anyway. Once I began doing what the first 100 did, I began getting the same results. I began going all day long without a drink. And then to my amazement, one day I woke up and I didn't need a drink. And I hadn't thought about a drink. What greater miracle can you possibly ask for? And then the transformation that happens to all people that don't drink, go to meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous, began to occur in my life. You know, when you do sober work, you get sober results. I don't know what that means for that. If that means something, I think for everybody a little different. Maybe it means financial prosperity. Maybe it means internal prosperity. Maybe it means you just found something to do with your life that gives you some sense of well-being. But I know my quality of life began to improve. I know things began to happen that were amazing to me. I know being in Southern California is amazing to me from where I came in 78. Last year they elected me to the school board in a community that I was raised in. You can't get there. You know, when they came forward, the women of the community came forward and said, we want you to run for office. I said, wait a minute, you don't know me. You don't know me. Let me tell you my story. You won't want your children around me. You won't want to be around me. But you know, normal people don't care what you've been doing. They care about what you're doing. And once you start taking up your
your place in society, but once you began doing the work, they want you to do some more of it. And I'm in my second term as an elected official, and I couldn't believe it. Blew my skirt up. Big old signs out there, you know. Big old signs out by where I live. Vote for Brooks. That's amazing. I've just told you where I came from. That's amazing to me. You know, I can't believe it. I can't believe it today. What I know is I really had very little to do with it. Many people have passed that meant a lot to me in my sobriety. But they're always replaced by other people. The scariest thing in the world is to wake up in a meeting, Alcoholics Anonymous, and realize you've been sober longer than anybody. It happens to all of us because we build one day at a time. Each one of us has one day at a time. But if you do that one day at a time and you do whatever you did today to stay sober tomorrow, then one day you'll be sitting in a meeting and they'll be giving dry dates, or they'll be talking about their sobriety, and you may find that you're the oldest one in the group. And I remember when that happened to me, and I was terrified because I'm not ready. What an awesome sense of responsibility to try to live up and make this thing attractive for the person that comes behind me. But you see, I don't have to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous but trust in God. I don't have to know anything. And I'm here to tell you, because I was invited to speak doesn't mean I know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous or about sobriety. It really just means I was lucky and I was in the right place at the right time and that God had a use for me. Because I'm here to tell you, I can't do it. I can't stay sober. I can't change my life. I can't be part of society. You know, God has been good to me. What I found in Alcoholics Anonymous was mercy, not justice. What I have is a daily reprieve based upon a spiritual condition. But God, it's neat to know I don't have to do it. I don't have to be an authority. I don't have to know everything there is to know. I don't have to run AA. I don't want to run AA. I want to take my chair. I want to clean my coffee cup. I want to go on 12-step calls. I want to read the big book. I want to sit next to people that want to do the same. I want to stand in the sunlight of the Spirit. I want to know for the first time in my life that I'm okay. The only time I've ever experienced a sense of well-being, really, is when I was talking about God, generally in meetings at Alcoholics Anonymous. I still like to go to church. I don't get in church. You know, I go to church for a different reason than I come to AA. I love Alcoholics Anonymous because of what it's done for me. I love the idea that it made things possible. You know, little Jeremy Sunshine Smith, 20 years old now, spent his 19th birthday in prison because he wanted to be like Daddy. And while he was in prison, I sent him a tape where I'd spoken New Mexico or somewhere. And he wrote me a letter. And he said, I was wrong. Because I'd listened to that tape once before, but I only listened to the first half. He only heard the part where I was talking about smuggling out of Mexico. He never heard the part about where that lifestyle leads you. The good news is you don't have to live that way anymore if you don't want to. The good news is if it can work for me, it can work for anybody. Because I've never seen anybody come to Alcoholics Anonymous sicker than me. I had two other children that I've raised. And Johnny knows them. Harold nicknamed one of them Foots when he was a baby because his feet were so big. He's been raised by people in Alcoholics Anonymous because his mother's been drunk all these years. And we finally had to divorce her, me and the kids. And I'm having to raise two kids by myself from the time they were little babies. And now one of them's 19 and one of them's 13. One of them got married last week. Now he's talking about making me a granddad this year. And I have a beautiful new wife. We've been married about 4, 5, 6 months now. She knows for sure. You know? And she really ought to be speaking to the young people instead of me. You know, by the grace of God. I've got another chance, and she's got a little girl that's 3, And I always wanted a little girl to raise, and I've got that. And Justin likes her, and he's 13, and he's a pain in the neck, because you are when you're 13. But they don't have the daddy I had. They don't have the life that I exposed my first son to. And I know something today that I didn't know when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1978. AA works for me. Thanks for having me.